Yep.
Great.
Perfect.
Loud and clear.
Let's get started here. Thank you for being with us on Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. I'd like to go ahead and call this a special city council meeting to order. Adriana?
Councilmember
Roll
Brown?
call. Go ahead.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilwoman Gussie? Here. Councilmember Manfredi?
Yep.
Councilmember Vitiello? Councilmember Wade?
Here.
Vice Mayor Smith?
Here.
Mayor Price?
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
Great. To the audience watching at home, we apologize for the delay. We were supposed to start at 5:30. Our e-session ran late, and then we had technical difficulties here in the chamber. So we wanted to clear all those up, and we seem to be operating now. So hopefully you're able to watch and see us at home. That'll take us to item 3.1 on this special city council meeting tonight. This is resolution 20-28. The resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Maricopa authorizing the allocation of funds and the amounts and for the purposes as approved by the city's review committee to businesses through the Maricopa Business Reemergence Program and to nonprofits through the Maricopa Food and Aid Distribution Nonprofit Assistance funded through the AZ CARES allocation of federal funding passed through the state of Arizona to the city of Maricopa and approving the AZ CARES grant agreement for each recipient of such funds. This is for discussion and action. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our city manager, Rick Horst.
Mayor and council, thank you for your time this evening. As you know, this is a program that is of great interest to many of our local businesses under the present situation that we're in. As the council directed, this program was put out approximately 2.5 weeks ago with a desire to move as quickly as we could to provide relief. We made sure that the program was widely broadcast through all media resources, social formats, online, local media, print, public announcements, radio, and we had, by results, we know that it had a lot of attention, a lot of people look at it. I wanted to give you just a little background as we went through the process. We rolled it out on a Thursday, and because it was on a Thursday and we're typically closed on Fridays, we staffed people in the office to entertain phone calls, thinking we might get some early calls. We did not receive any calls on that date. And I want you to know that a number of staff, particularly the committee that you appointed, which are all salaried employees who did not receive any overtime, spent numerous hours on the weekends and evenings to first put the program together, second to evaluate. And I also like to express appreciation to Adam Shipley, who was not a member of the committee and had no voice or vote in the matter, but he was the administrator of the program. He answered questions regarding meetings, definitions, what qualifies and what does not. But even with all that, we had quite the array of applications. And I wanted to be clear that we had two programs. One was the Business Reemergence Program, which was very defined to only include rent or mortgage payments for March, April, and May, and PPE needed to protect their employees and or customers who come into their place of business. The strictness of that was not defined only by this city council, but by state and federal regulations prior to it ever getting to our level. The second program was the nonprofit program, which is designed for people who provided food and or other types of aid to residents of the Maricopa community. That had a little more flexibility into it, and that we could consider a number of things because we didn't want to limit ourselves to what that aid might mean. So we received those applications. We also made it very clear that addresses, main businesses had to be within the city, particularly for the business emergency, reemergence program. As we received applications and as we reviewed them, those who were disqualified because they resided in Pinal County were told immediately so that they could apply through the Pinal County process, thus allowing them the time and the opportunity to do so that they would not miss out on a funding opportunity. Many of the applications we received were complete, many were not, and we spent a lot of time and effort to complete those applications. In some cases, the applicants were very cooperative and helpful and timely in their responses, but in some cases, it took a great deal of effort, and if I could just be frank, some saying that they were on vacations and didn't have time to deal with it. Yet we were trying to help the community as a whole as much as we possibly could. We had a lot of definition, I guess, from applicants on what they thought PPE meant, which is protective gear, face shields, masks, anything that would, separations, markings, all those type of things that were on the door. And frankly, I guess I don't mind people who try to shoot for the moon hoping to hit the stars, but our limitations was just the stars. So we have presented to you tonight our recommendations. I want to add some others that may or may not be on your list and ask that you would amend to make sure these are included. They include 2 applications that were caught up in the system, and so that's why they're late, but it was clear that they were filed in time. So I just want to quickly read those to get these on the record, and if you choose to move forward with the recommendations tonight, that you would amend it to include these. Fry Storm Enterprises doing business as Rockstar Arizona for $14,182. Liquidate Arizona with a suggested award of $8,975. And forgive me if I pronounce it wrong, but Pramarzik Family Dentistry, $16,911.31. Against Abuse, a suggested award of $18,756. And then as a contingency, the Boys and Girls Club for $100,000. Now, I want to be clear that this is a contingency, not an award, and it depends on details coming out as we try to find ways and means to allow for greater daycare programs. So I want to be clear that this is not an award to the Boys and Girls Club and may not ever happen. And if it doesn't happen, the intent would be to take this contingency money and put it back into our own program, COPA Camp, or any other options that come up to provide for daycare opportunities as distant learning is going to be upon us for our students, and parents are now being called to go back into work. So those details will be worked out, and as they come forward, we will present them back to the council for your authority and approval. But we're just asking that this dollars be put into a contingency for a program or this type program going forward. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. This resolution, of course, is all of the the nonprofits and the businesses with the 2 conflict of interest ones, which will come forward in the second resolution.
Ricky, what was the name before Against Abuse? What was that name?
Dr. Kumar.
Against Abuse?
Before that one.
Oh, it was,
Dr. Kramarczyk's Family Dentistry.
it's spelled Kramarczk.
All right.
Kasmarek. Family Dentistry.
What type of business is that?
Family Dentistry. Dentist.
Industry.
That in 1 hour.
You don't get to judge. Did you have a question, Councilwoman
I had
Gussie?
regarding the dentistry. Is there a reason why this is a last minute, it's not within any of the emails or any of the?
Right. We had 2 businesses contact us, one yesterday and one today, saying that they had filed an application, but there was no mention of it, and yet we didn't receive the applications. And so we went back and checked, and we don't know if it got hung up in spam or what happened, but the evidence suggests that they did seek to submit their applications on time. Therefore, we felt it appropriate and recommended that they come forward for your consideration tonight.
And what was the amount and the purpose? It's just because it's not written here any,
For which one?
for the dentistry.
The dentist, $16,911.31. That's 3 months' rent, and the rest is PPE. And you can imagine their PPE is a little bit more because of the medical nature of what they do.
Thank you.
Council, I have a few concerns or questions that I wanted to raise to you all and back to the committee. Is one of the things that I know that on this list, there are certain folks that have to be closed longer according to the governor's latest order, such as gyms. And I know we have a couple on here. We have stuck to a mantra of, you know, what those that kind of everybody, but there's an additional burden placed on these now because of the additional order. So I am curious, as council, would you be willing to add an extra month or, you know, contingency for extra 2 months, depending on how long these businesses have to be closed? I mean, this is what this money is for. Is that something that you would see to grant or not? So I just wanted to throw that out there for you all to discuss.
And if I may, Mayor, we have one bar, and I think it's 3 fitness-related centers that are closed. We already know their monthly amounts, and that's been documented, so to add a month or two, if you make that a part of your motion, we could just make that happen tonight.
I know that right now the order is at least for a month. I don't know if it'll extend or not. We won't know until that July 27th. You know, we could basically contingency it the same way we're doing some of these other things and say that it's approval for 2 and go that route if you wanted to be for those 4 entities because, again, of the additional closure as requested by the governor. So that would be something I think that would fill right in with what we're doing. But, again, it's up to you all on what you want to do. So leave it open to you for discussion. Yes.
Are you including the Sunrise Taekwondo in that group?
I had not thought of that. No, I had not thought about that, but that is absolutely, probably fits right in there along with it if indeed they are closed. So, yes, absolutely.
Mayor and council, if I may suggest, allow the staff to evaluate if they are closed under the governor's order, and then the extra month will apply because the order is for 1 month. And if it's extended through your contingency, we'll then automatically do a second month in addition.
What was the name of that one? I'm sorry. It's
She had mentioned the Taekwondo place.
oh,
That would also probably apply to Firestorm as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, Firestorm is operating a little differently.
Okay.
I've had very
Okay.
long conversations with them, but it might very well, depending on what the current conversations are with them, so.
And again, we'll validate if they are physically closed under the governor's order, then I assume what you mean is for that to apply to them.
Yeah.
Right.
And you might as well include Desert Sun Performing Arts also, because they are.
Right.
Who?
Desert Sun Performing Arts.
ESPA.
I'm comfortable with that extension and basically making August, then you're saying, a
Contingency, so to speak.
contingency, yes. Yeah.
July would be automatic, August would be contingent upon
comfortable
the extension of
with
the
that.
governor's order.
Yep.
I'd second that.
I don't think we're going to do a motion.
What if the governor,
Go ahead.
hold on, what if the governor closes restaurants next month?
Great question. The question was, what if governor closes restaurants next month?
What if he closes nail salons or hair salons next month?
It's my opinion that we can't deal with speculation. And frankly, if they do, I think the council can reconvene and decide if you want to do something further.
Okay, thanks.
Good question.
Okay. Do we need to, we've given, I think, does anyone have a problem with that as we've discussed it thus far? If not, we've given that direction to you. Do you need that as part of a motion when we close this whole thing up?
Yes,
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
So we'll need to add that as part of a motion, all right? Just keeping track of that. The other thing that we wanted to discuss then is, I don't know if we've talked much about it because it's in this particular item. We kind of focused it on the business side, but we haven't touched much on the nonprofit side. Rick, do you want to touch a little bit on the nonprofits?
Thank you. Do you want me to go through all of them or just?
No, I think just go through just go through some of the ones here. I think, and I think specifically, I think there's been a lot of talk out there from constituency about multiple food banks. There's a food bank that resides inside the county, and then one inside the
Sure.
city, and kind of talk about that leeway and what we tried to accomplish, but yet there's been some material events today take place that have
Sure.
solidified some of where we stand and what that means for us.
Sure, the guidelines, both again from the federal, state, as well as those instituted by the council, made it very clear that this was not intended to be a redundant type program. If they had the ability to receive funds through other programs, whether it be federal, state, or in this case, Pinal County, that's where they should go. In this particular case, we did have 3, if my memory serves, businesses located in Pinal County that we told them initially that they were not eligible because they were not located in the city, and that they should apply through Pinal County for funding, which they did. In some instances, if Pinal County had not funded, and if they could substantiate services directly to the city, then maybe that might have been considered through a contingency. But in this particular case, they were funded. And again, the goal is not to duplicate funding sources. And let's remind everyone that the Pinal County justifiably received significant more money than the city of Maricopa, and the whole purpose was for them to protect and work with businesses located within the jurisdictional limits, the non-city limits of the county. So we had verification today that in this particular case, the food pantry was awarded through Pinal County, and we feel comfortable that their needs are met. And frankly, that's where we rest on the matter.
Just as a sidebar to that, again, from what we understand is that they've been fully funded. This additional food pantry has been fully funded as per their request, minus construction costs, which fall outside of the parameters
Right.
of the legal use of the funding.
Right.
And I just wanted to basically tell the public and the council that council had advised me earlier that I may have said something a little bit too far. I just wanted to offer my apologies for that. Certainly, I was trying to respond back to the constituency. We had talked about a contingency funding, if needs be. In other words, if the county didn't fully fund, that we could provide, because they do provide services to the city. We just certainly wanted to make sure that they were getting the funding faster, not slower. That's been the whole intent of this program. So anyways, again, my apologies to the public, to the council, if I implied that, there was something that was going to happen outside of this meeting. This is where things happen. I mean, I declared this earlier that, the making of the sausage is that this is an ongoing process, and until there's a decision point, anything is possible. And so certainly that's where we're at, and certainly wanted to make sure that folks knew that I was doing my best to answer questions in real time, but also not give away too much in something that we would discuss here in the public eye, but certainly didn't want my council members to feel as though I was boxing them into a corner as to something they had to vote for either. So again, my apologies there. But city manager.
Quick point of clarification. We've been informed that they have been awarded through the county. We haven't received any official notification, nor would we, because it's not our business. So I would just put that caveat on it.
Right.
Rick, I'm sorry, Christian, Rick, I'd like to jump in here for a second. Regarding the food pantry, we're going to remove the contingency of $35,000 or leave it in?
It's off the table and not being presented.
I'd like to re-add it actually, because although the county might have said, or to somebody, whoever that somebody is, that it's been fully funded, I don't know what it's been fully funded for or what. I know that the pantry provided 2 distinctly different applications. One to the county to support county-wide efforts through Hidden Valley. And the one that they gave to the city of Maricopa consisted of helping the city of Maricopa. 2 separate things. So for me, I'd prefer to leave the Maricopa pantry contingency in there, not awarding it to them, but leave it in as a contingency of $35,000. That allows us to come back and look at what the county has approved once we know what they have approved, and then talk to the Maricopa Pantry and see what services they're looking for with that $35,000. As far as I know, it's meant for a refrigeration unit for a truck, and that means instead of having the fruits and vegetables that Jim delivers to the city of Maricopa nearly on a weekly basis, he would be able to keep them refrigerated and instead of them spoiling as fast. So for me, I prefer to leave Maricopa Pantry as a suggested contingency award of $35,000 in the nonprofit section. And then we can talk about it later, but if we don't do it, we can't talk about it later, if that makes sense.
Thank you,
I'd
Councilmember.
support that.
I support that as well, actually.
Say that again, legal? Go ahead. Did you have a comment?
My only comment is at the discretion of the city council. I certainly don't have any issue with it from my point of view.
Mayor?
Okay, yes.
So I feel like at this point, I've had dialogue with some of the constituents regarding the Maricopa Pantry, dialogue with Pinal County. There's an understanding there that they had communicated with the pantry clearly that they should do all of their requests through the county and not to the city. But it does sound to me as though there's some misunderstandings and that possibly the pantry was given some incorrect information from somebody from the city. And so given that, I would be open to the idea of leaving a contingency until it's hashed out for the $35,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and we leave it up to the staff to talk to Pantry, figure out what they're missing from the county that they wanted from the city, and see if there's an ability for us to help. Because I believe that what the Pantry does in the city of Maricopa is tremendous for the people that live here. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen smiling faces of people that have been able to get food from them.
And what bothers me about this whole scenario and how we got to this point is when we first had discussions about this, I asked a question about them being located in not inside the city of Maricopa, which was on the application. But it seems that changed at some point in time where that was not a factor to be considered. And so they did go through considerable analysis to support where they thought the funding was going to be coming from, because that's where they were directed to, that being the county. And I agree with Vincent after having conversations that county program is not necessarily the same that's going to be needed for the city needs that they have, that they support on a regular basis. So I agree. We can't talk about it later. Talk about it now, and we can have more conversation about it when necessary.
Yeah, I think there's just too much misunderstanding to just say, no, we're not going to address it. I am disappointed, too, that we were very clear during city council, an open city council meeting, that all of the requests from anyone within the unincorporated part of Pinal County needed to go to Pinal County. Supervisor Smith gave his assurance that he would fund those elements to the greatest extent according to the federal and state guidelines. And so it was very clear, so I'm really disappointed that this type of misunderstanding happened. I'm disappointed for the pantry because they were completely confused. Their supporters and their volunteers were completely confused, and I'm not sure how the different information reached the pantry in that way, because both the city during city council was clear and the county was clear, and so I'm not sure where the miscommunication came from, and I'm sad that that happened, and I think we have to leave it open for discussion at this point.
Yeah, certainly this is one of those challenging times when you roll out a program very quickly. You have overlapping jurisdictions. Everybody is trying to figure out where they fit. Those that are clearly, operating down the street here know that that's easy to determine where they're going to put their application in. And, folks that serve both sides of the line, so to speak, becomes a much more difficult process, and certainly one that we're working through as well. So, I certainly have no problem putting it as a contingency. And again, that doesn't mean necessarily an award, but rather a further investigation, further discussion, and certainly evaluation by staff, and then to bring it back before council when those evaluations are done. So, are there any other questions or concerns on the business side and or the nonprofit side before moving on to another agenda item? And closing out this one. Hold on, go to Vice Mayor and then to Councilmember Manfredi.
Well, mine deals with the code provision. So if Councilmember Manfredi has something more specific to business or
It has to do with what?
a code provision for emergency measure,
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
let Manfredi go first.
Perfect. Councilmember Manfredi.
Yeah, my other discussion point is the Boys and Girls Club of, I guess, Maricopa. Not sure. Reason being, and I know what the staff's idea is here, that they'll open sometime in the future and be able to help with the after-school programs. For me, I'm not sure I'm okay with it because of they're not here. They've never been here. I don't know if they'll be here. And I know they've made announcements they're going to be here eventually and all that good stuff. But what investment has the Boys and Girls Club made in the city of Maricopa that would necessitate us giving them $100,000, even if it's contingency? I see a lot of other programs in the city of Maricopa that might have been better for this, but they didn't apply, so of course they're not going to get that. So when I look at it, the Boys and Girls Club contingency for $100,000, I don't know how I don't think I support that one. I really don't. But if the rest of council feels it's very important, I'll move along because I'm not going to stand in the middle of all the funding. But what I look at is I'm not sure, and that's what I'm saying on it. I know that the Copa Cares, which is part of the city's services that we offer, is doing this already. Can they do it more? And can that $100,000 be switched to Copa Cares and let them continue the programs that they're currently working on and are currently successful?
Thank you for your comments. I'll pass it to City Manager Horst.
Well, again, it's at the discretion of the city council, but again, all we're doing is setting aside a placeholder to get the details information you desire, and you can act on it or not act on it as that comes forward, much like the discussion we just had with the pantry.
So my opinion on this one is that I completely understand where Councilmember Manfredi is coming from. And I think it's something that I too had, some hangups on, but I think you can kind of kill two birds with one stone in this particular issue. To Councilmember Manfredi's point, that they're not here yet and that they might be. Well, they've announced they're going to be. I know that I was on a meeting, today, this afternoon where they were showcased and they were talking about opening here and making the announcement. If COVID hadn't happened, they'd already be open and operating, but it doesn't, again, to the point that they're not here yet, it's completely valid. However, that being said, this is a program that would be filling in a gap that is absolutely becoming a bigger problem. And that is that even if we put this in contingency, this is not writing them a check for $100,000, but rather they have to come back and submit receipts to us saying they've spent X and therefore they have made the investment here in Maricopa and they've been operating and it has therefore justified, $20,000 of expense or $500 in expense or whatever the case is. And then we would write them that check. And just like you said, Councilman Manfredi, is that we can talk about it now so we can put it in there so we can talk about it later. But at the same time, if that's the same case, then by the same token, to your point, I think if they don't perform and they don't do that, by having this money set aside in contingency, we can come back and talk about it. We can put it back into Copa Cares, or the Copa Camp Copa, if that line item in our city budget needs that bolstering in order to provide those services. Whether we'll provide them the same, I can't argue that. I just know that it could basically kill the two birds with one stone. So, my proposal would be that we leave it in under the strict understanding that it is contingency, that it is intended that if they don't perform, if they don't do, and they don't ever arrive, then obviously that money sits there and we can come back and talk about it and utilize it for the program that we already know is successful, and that would be my proposal. Yes, Councilwoman Benson.
I completely agree with Councilmember Manfredi's observation on this one. I did have a question, though. Regarding Santa Cruz Elementary, that's where they're going to be operating from. So are they going to be leasing it from MUSD, and then the money is just going to revolve? That money is going to go back as far as rent is concerned, if that's what we're issuing these funds to, back to MUSD?
I'm not aware of the business arrangements between the Boys Club and Girls Club with Santa Cruz Elementary School and their routine operations. This one particularly would be, all those questions would need to be asked. I think the intent with this would be multiple sites reaching out to hundreds of kids and not just one site. But again, those are the details we need to have forthcoming before we can make a decision.
And is MUSC going to get any CARES money?
I'm sorry?
Is MUSC going to get any CARES money? Do we know? Is there a possibility?
We received it from the government.
There's different funding buckets available to MUSD and frankly, all the charter schools and others, which I'm not familiar with, but I do know there's been millions allocated for various purposes to assist the schools.
Well, couldn't they in turn fund this instead of the city? Through their CARES funds, instead of the city's CARES funds?
I can't speak to that. I don't know what their funding is eligible for or how much they received or anything else.
So just to answer a question,
One thing that should not be forgotten here is that the Boys and Girls Club services older children as well. Provide programs for older children. So it's not just the daycare or younger children option. We would be getting more opportunities for those use of those funds. Supporting the older population as well. Because they go to 10 to 12, I think is what they operate at.
Well, with all due respect, Councilmember Wade, they are asking for specifically after-school programs. They're not including the older generation.
Not after school, it's be all day, so parents are being called back to work, and while you're doing distance learning, before the kids return to physical presence in school, the parents are saying, what do we do with our kids? I have to return to work. I have no program to put them in. And this is, the intent would be kind of a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., whatever meets the needs of the parent in that regard. And yes, it's intended for all age kids within primary, K through 12 type things. Admittedly, maybe the K, the seniors and juniors don't need that,
they're not
but in some cases they might. I don't know.
as a throwing things at you, my apologies. Good thing we did this
It's not K to 12, it's 12-year-olds, not K to 12, so it's not including the high school kids, just the COPA CARES program.
Right. So Vice Mayor had brought up a point about MUSD getting funding, and I was unaware of that, but I was thinking of it much like they got funding like we did, which is a certain designated amount that was a lump sum that came in one big lump sum distribution. I think the amount you're talking about is a recent expenditure by the governor as kind of a lump sum, but when you consider how many districts are in this state, I think it was only $5.5 million or something that they got. And when you divide that across 278 districts in the state, it doesn't go very far. And if it's going to charter schools on top of that, it's even less. So, I mean, when you talk about covering base costs, you're covering mass and cleaning equipment. You're not talking about anything else. You're not talking about rent. You're not talking about anything. So I just don't think there's a lot of money there in general. So I wouldn't consider that to be a lump sum like we're talking about here. I consider that as kind of that differential between when cities like Mesa and the bigger counties were given it directly, they got $175 a person. When we got it through the governor, he took a haircut off of it and gave us $115 a person. And that differential is what he has set aside for things that the state might need, this being one of them. When the school district showed up and said, well, hey, what about us? He went, oh, well, I have this money over here. Let me give you a little chunk of it, right? And that's what he's doing, is he's doling it out in little chunks to kind of pacify the problems that are coming up still as part of all this whole thing. So it wasn't like it came from Congress straight to us, stopping at the governor, and that's where I was mixed up. So yes, so Vice Mayor and then Councilmember Vidiello.
Yes, to add on to what Councilmember Wade indicated, this is a different age group of children that we're looking to accommodate when the parents have to go back to work because summer is over. Any extended leave that they had is over, and school is still not open. And I think in addition to that, it's going to require programming that I believe that the Boys and Girls Club is set up to do in terms of helping them understand how to use we just learned this morning at META meeting that they were able to acquire computers for students. And so the students are going to have computers, and they're going to have the ability and programming to be able to log on to those computers and to do their homework, and I believe that the Boys and Girls Club is equipped to do that. I don't know that our Camp Copa is equipped to do that, although it's definitely an option and something that we could look at. What I would like to propose is that because this is $100,000 of contingency, when the plan is known, bring it back to the council and help us understand what it's being used for, and then help us feel comfortable with the use of that money.
Well, with all contingency funds, it would come back to the council for your final approval. And although details are pending, I don't think there's any intent to pay rent.
Right,
So
okay.
Okay? Councilmember Vidillo.
So the contingency, how long is this going to last? Is this going to be 6 months, a year? How long will that be before the decision will be made where if they're not going to open up for 2 years, we could use this money for other people?
programs can only last through December. So that's the worst case scenario.
Okay.
So at that
Councilmember
point-
Vitiello, the Boys and Girls Club would open as soon as the school allows them to open, or whether or not students are coming to school.
Right.
This would open so that they could take in those children and those students.
Right, but until they allow the schools to open,
Yes.
they're not going to allow it. So then, how long is this going to be where other people that we might be able to help, if this is going to last
No, the
6,
schools
9
are going
months?
to allow the Boys and Girls Club to open, even though the schools are not open.
Gotcha.
And to be clear, we're not saying we're looking to fund a program to the end of December. We're just saying we
Right.
have to act on these funds before then. This program may buy 2 weeks, 6 weeks, I don't know, and we don't even know when school starts. The intent is to try to fill a gap if at all possible, but again, we're pending details. So as those details and the plan is developed, we will bring it back for your review, consideration, and edits, to be quite honest.
And I certainly would like to hammer that point for a second, is that, again, on all these contingency fundings, it is critical that there's a conversation between staff and the individual or individual is the wrong word, corporation, right, or nonprofit entity that is potentially receiving this, that it does need to come back for council for approval, and that furthermore, it really is an understanding of a plan that we're not necessarily pre-funding, right? I mean, isn't that kind of what we're trying to say
Right.
here, is that in this case, like the Boys and Girls Club, is that they're making this investment and they're paying this off, but yet they could submit in 2 weeks, they could submit the receipts of what they had to pay their employees to be here and run the program, that it cost them X, and that we could reimburse that, right? And they could do that every 2 weeks and once receiving our approval. But my point is that we're not handing them a check for $35,000 up front and then they spend it, right? It's that we're really trying to say, you have shown and given a good faith effort in being here and running a program, and now we're paying for that reimbursement. So again, that's going to take communication, because again, in so many of these other things, it looks like these other businesses are getting a check, but the reality is they've already spent that money too, right? They paid it in rent, they paid it in PPE. They're just being made whole for what they've already expended. And I think that's the consistency of this argument, is that we're just trying to make sure that everybody is doing this and giving that good faith effort, and then this is coming back on the backside to say, we're making you whole for what you've done, right? So that way, again, being consistent across all platforms with everybody here. So, okay, anything else on this?
Boys and Girls Clubs nationwide have done very well. One of their famous alumnus is Denzel Washington. So he's done pretty well himself.
Definitely. And I think that's the key. So again, in concert with the arguments that have been made here today, I think that's kind of where we're at. Vice Mayor, you had a question or a statement that you wanted to talk about urgency.
Yes, so in terms of urgency, typically resolutions don't go into place for 30 days. And so we need to incorporate the emergency measure, which is necessary for the immediate preservation of the peace, health, safety, and welfare of the city. So I'd like to include that in the motion as well.
Okay. Does anyone have a problem with an emergency measure being added to this? Seeing none. All
Mr.
right.
Mayor, just so, two amendments. Emergency amendment, and we can add that to the resolution. But could somebody just restate the other amendment? I know we were adding 2 different applications, and then the contingency for Boys and Girls Club.
So
I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, before we do this, so again, we have two amendments, but again, this is all part of a motion that has not been made yet. So we have really three things, and the first was an additional month as a given with a potential extra if the governor extends it for gyms and other things that have been closed down by the governor at this time. A contingency grouping for $100,000 for the Boys and Girls Club and $35,000 for the pantry, with the stipulations that the council will be brought back into the knowledge of what the plans are and how it's to be utilized, and for a further discussion before approval. And then finally is the addition of the emergency clause as it would need to apply to this item, Resolution 20-28. So those are the three things. Is there anything else that needs to be discussed? Vice Mayor.
I'd be willing to make that motion.
Okay, anyone else to discuss anything? If not, let's go ahead and make the motion.
Vice Mayor. I just promoted myself. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve item, what is it?
Resolution 20-28.
20-28, Resolution -20-28, to include the added 1-month rental for gyms and
Businesses closed under executive order.
businesses closed under executive order, and then an additional 1-month rent as a contingency, should that continue in the month of August, and also for a $100,000 contingency for the Boys and Girls Club of America, a $35K contingency for the Maricopa Pantry, and to add the emergency clause as necessary.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion. Motion and a second. Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion? Dennis, do you need anything else in that motion about the other things that were read into the record? About the others that were received but not received, that kind of thing? It's all been discussed. I just want
Right, Mr. Mayor, I think it's all been discussed. Council heard the discussion from the city manager, so I think.
Well, with that then, can we move to a roll call to please have council vote?
Councilmember Bidiello? Vice Mayor Smith?
Yes?
Councilmember Brown?
Yes?
Councilmember Manfredi?
Yes.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Yes?
Councilmember Wade?
Yes.
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. That'll take us to discussion on item 3.2. This is broken out for a variety of reasons. We'll get to those in a second. This is Resolution 20-29, a resolution of the Mayor and City Council, City of Maricopa, Arizona, authorizing the allocation of funds and the amounts to the purposes as approved by the city's review committee to businesses through the Maricopa Business Reemergence Program funded through the AZ CARES allocation of federal funding passed through the state of Arizona through the City of Maricopa, and approving the AZ CARES grant application for each recipient of such funds. This is for discussion and action. City Manager Horst, do you want to talk about this one, and then we'll move to potential recusals? City Manager?
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is the resolution, very similar to the first resolution. We broke out two separate businesses in this resolution, and this resolution, I think, has Cool Line Plumbing and in Maricopa in it. So those were broken out separately, because I think a couple council members don't want to vote on this.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Is the proposal in which we take each of those items separately, therefore, because otherwise you're basically going to lose two council members on one vote? If you take them separately.
That's a good point, Mr. Mayor. I mean, the resolution is written so that those two companies are in together, so.
Okay. Okay, well, that's.
But, Mr. Mayor, you're bringing up a good point, because we need 3/4 if we're going to, if the vice mayor is going to put in an emergency clause. So we can do a separate vote, and then,
Can we do a separate vote on one, so two votes on one resolution based on the two items in it?
we can, Mr. Mayor, why don't we just, we
Mayor
could
and
do,
council, I don't think it matters unless we don't have enough vote to carry the motion.
we just need, because of the emergency clause, we're going to need 3/4, and I think that's what he's worried about,
Yeah,
is if
that's
we
true,
lose
too.
two, we're going to lose the 3/4.
Well, can we not make that a separate motion to apply the emergency clause to the resolution and then move for the final vote?
Bring them back can we bring them back on the same issue, though? even though it's a separate issue of the emergency clause is separate, it's an enforcement side of it? Like an application side of it, or is it all still one motion of one item?
I think it's one motion of one item, but I think you could break it out, and we could just, we have Resolution 2029 that could just apply to Cool Line Plumbing. We could do that motion, and then we'll do a new Resolution 20-30 for in Maricopa, and we could do it that way if the Vice Mayor wants to make her amendment to both those motions.
Okay.
So we could do it that way so that we'd have the 3/4 vote we're going to need.
Okay.
So for clarification, 2029 will be for in Maricopa, and we would excuse that person, and then come 2030 for Kuline.
Right, I just did them the other way, whichever.
Isn't it a 2/3 vote of the voting members, not the actual whole council? So if two of us recuse, the 2/3 is 3,
You got my thing.
isn't it?
His question is the 3/4 based on those present and able to vote, or the entire body? And I kind of thought it was based on, if we only had 5 present tonight, that's 3/4 of who's here. But 5 out of 7 also hits the 3/4 mark. So that's why I was asking.
Lots of questions here. Let us figure it out. Hold on a second.
It's kind of like we've dealt with COVID all our lives.
All our lives.
Rick, I thought we were going to separate each one of them individually where we would recuse ourselves from that individual vote.
Yeah, the question is, how do we get the emergency clause built into that, and does that require how many votes? Well,
Why would the emergency clause
we'll
be,
let the attorney speak to that in just a moment.
why would the emergency clause have anything to do with two separate?
You know, it's an amount of people that is required to affix an emergency clause. Or 3/4.
members of the elected council.
3/4 of the members.
What's 3/4 of 7?
Yeah.
Is this you or her?
So that's 5, right?
So again, I guess my last question is
That's 5.25, so do you round up or round down?
Well, let's again, if I would feel much more comfortable if we could break this out. If we could break this out and just do 2, but my question is are we violating anything by having a 20-30 in here?
Add it now.
Because we're basically adding it, but it's already been discussed in this item. We're just breaking it out. So it's like
It's
item
been
A,
publicly introduced.
Right,
right? Is that okay? I mean, we're
right. You're not extending, I mean, somebody who might want to come to say, hey, I object to one of those 2 companies, they still have every right to have made their objection if they did. We're just breaking it out.
Yeah, I'm just talking legally speaking from a 24-hour posting notice standpoint, from a, you know, this looks like a separate agenda item that wasn't on the agenda here 24 hours ago, but yet at the same time, in this agenda item of 20-29, they were both in there. All we've done is subsection it out. So it's still, there's nothing been added to the agenda. It's just been separated so that we can have a clear vote on both of them. And if you...
Right, the council had made the decision to pass this with a resolution. They've already passed one resolution for all these businesses. We broke this part of it out because of the potential, we knew a couple council members didn't want to vote on it.
Right.
The emergency clause just came up tonight, and so because of that, I mean, if we would have did the emergency clause before, we would have just added an extra resolution. So all council's doing now, I think, is saying, in light of that, we'll add the extra resolution so that we can pass everything with the emergency clause.
Okay. So with that, let's deal with item 3.2, which is going to be resolution 2029 for in Maricopa. Councilmember Manfredi, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, as a minority owner of the In Maricopa, 85239.com LLC, which is the official name of the business, which operates as In Maricopa in the city of Maricopa, I recuse myself for voting on this, if that's appropriate. Done, right?
Perfect. And then that will leave the 6 of us to vote. Go ahead and vote, and then we will call you back when we get to the next item. So again, item 3.2, this is dealing with in Maricopa, Resolution 20-29. We've already discussed it. Is there a motion to approve?
I do have a comment, just for the record.
Yes, please.
Just for the record, I do believe that this was already discussed, but the amount of lease, that the sublease amount has already been removed from the request, correct? I just want to make sure, put it on the record, that the subleases that 85239 LLC, the sublease amounts have been deducted from the request that they submitted for rent.
Not sure I understand by sublease.
They sublease certain sections of their building.
Yes, there's no rent applied to the funding for, what's it called?
85239. For
Yes.
the record, I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to make sure
Yes,
I
that's
put that out
correct.
there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Part of the motion, I'd like to also incorporate the emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the peace, health, safety, and welfare of the city.
Okay, so is there an official motion then? Would you make that motion with
I
that?
certainly will. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 20-29, incorporating the emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the peace, health, safety, and welfare of the city.
Is there a second?
Support.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion at this time? All in favor? Actually, I'm going to go to roll call, keep it even. Let's move to the roll call, please.
Councilmember Wade?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Smith?
Yes?
Councilmember Bittiello?
Yes.
Councilwoman Gussie? Councilmember Brown?
Yes?
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And then that'll take us to item 20-30. This is dealing with Cool Line Plumbing specifically. So I would invite Councilman Manfredi to please come back, and at this time, move it to Councilmember Vitiello.
Yes, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote as I am employed by Cool Line Plumbing.
Thank you, Councilmember. Give you a second to leave the dais here. So again, this resolution is similar to the last, just breaking this out based on potential conflicts. So with that, I assume that we will move back to the Vice Mayor, who would wish to include the emergency clause as well. Is there any further discussion? I know we haven't gone to a motion yet. Is there any further discussion on this particular item? Hearing none, we'll move to the Vice Mayor to make a motion and include that emergency clause, please.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'd like to move to approve Resolution 20-30 to incorporate the emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the peace, health, safety, and welfare of the city.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second?
Support.
Have a second? Any further discussion on this? Hearing none at this time, we'll move to a roll call.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes?
Councilmember Wade?
Yeah.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Yes.
Councilmember Manfredi?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Smith?
Yes?
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Okay. Council, that takes care of these items here, I think. Let's see. And then we have item 3.3. Okay, sorry. Last thing. So we have a grant 20-01. The mayor and city council shall discuss and possibly take action to ratify the grant agreement terms and conditions with the state of Arizona Governor's Office for the distribution of federal financial assistance to the city of Maricopa from the state of Arizona AZ Cares Fund. This is for discussion and action. Rick, do you have anything to say on this? I mean, this is just the ratification of the receiving of the monies and therefore, everything that goes into that. Now, I know this is still kind of a separate issue, but just on something that we probably should have stated a little bit more clearly on the past two things, which kind of applies to this, is that just like we are ratifying the receiving of these funds, we are requiring all of the recipients of funds that we have given out tonight to be received by contract, so to speak, right, by resolution. They have to sign a form saying they received it, that they're going to use it for in the ways that they proposed and that they intended, and that we are going to check and audit that. And that we are going to, basically agree back and forth to that. So while that doesn't specifically cite to this particular item, I wanted to make sure before we moved on, just like we're ratifying this, we are going to require businesses to ratify what they get and receive on their end, and we're going to make them sign paperwork accordingly.
That's right, Mr. Mayor. We have our own grant agreement that we'll enter into with each individual entity, and where they'll explain that they're going to do exactly what they said they're going to do and provide the receipts and things like that.
Perfect. Okay.
Is there a time frame, Dennis, that we allow them to give us the necessary paperwork?
Everything needs to be spent, I mean, before the end of the year, before December 31st of this year. And we, so we expect them to, all money needs to be spent by that time. And so once they've spent their money, then they can come back to us to provide the receipts and things like that to show that they were spent consistent with their application and how it was approved.
The rents and mortgages have already been validated because they're retro being reimbursed. So it's really mostly PPE. We will be doing site inspections to make sure that they did what they said they would do, and it contingent upon when they put the program into effect. I suspect this will happen over the next 30 to 45 days mostly, but as mentioned, officially they have until December.
So I'd like to just offer a comment if it's possible.
Proceed.
And that comment would be to our citizens and community in Maricopa. We are very happy that we were able to receive these funds from the federal government and from the state so that we could pass on to the citizens of Maricopa. And hoping that certainly the citizens would realize that one of our most important efforts is for their support and the needs of the community. And I would say that I am very proud of a council that takes such effort to show or to benefit the community based on the efforts that we take with everything that we do, including economic development, safety, being the fourth safest city in Arizona, and all those things that we do. So I just want to say that I'm proud of that. Now, there is a caveat that I offer, and I don't mean to throw stones or what have you, but I would say that when things are being done and things are being discussed, if we could make sure that confidentiality is used as a part of transparency. I know it sounds kind of strange to say that, but we should operate under the guise of confidentiality for the purpose of transparency so that there won't be confusions among the masses as to what we are doing. So thank you, fellow council members. Thank you, community. And I'm just very pleased with the outcome of being able to provide these resources to the community.
Thank you, Councilman.
Well said, well said.
Thank you. Okay, that leads us with the need for a motion and a second for this particular item. Is there a motion? Motion by Councilwoman Gussie. Is there a second? Councilmember Vitiello. And with that, is there any further discussion on the item? Hearing none, let's move to roll call.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Smith?
Yes?
Councilmember Bediello? Councilmember Wade?
Yes.
Councilmember Manfredi?
Well, you cut up there, but I'm going to say yes.
Great. Mayor Price?
Yes, as well.
Motion passed.
Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you, Councilman Manfredi. And that concludes our meeting for this evening. Thank you, Council. Thank you to the community, and we hope that this certainly helps people when and where it's needed. So we'll continue to check back and make sure that we do everything we possibly can. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved?
So moved.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, and thank you to staff.